there was something you had to look at broadly speaking for your school setting as well as for yourself, are there any other programs or development you'd like to have access to either as a school community or within an individual capacity?
I'd have to say, for me, I'm not sure about you, Jenny, but I'm always worried that the information or the courses that I've taken, that I'm not going to say the wrong thing to the student, in the moment. So it's just like first aid. We do first aid every year. So if someone cuts their finger, I, have the memory and muscle memory to do it very quickly and deal with the first aid situation. When it comes to mental health, because it's happening, not every day, and I don't have that continual training, I guess I'm worried that, what I say in the moment isn't going to be the correct thing for that particular person. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think it's also that if you think about the iceberg, what you're seeing when you're trying to deal with a mental health situation is some behaviours, and in that moment you're not sure what's going on underneath, in that iceberg. You can just see that point, but yeah, I guess the principles we have at school about dignity and communication and things like that, and we have a list of things that we, heads that we think, okay, has the parent been informed, what else, GO, guidance officer, and all of those sorts of things. But I think teachers in their busy lives, it would be great for them to have that first aid course, Cindy. I think that's that's a really simple way of thinking about it is, we have, if you've got a cut, you know what to do. But with mental health, we don't have that continual refresher of the principles. We do run some wellbeing sessions every year, and we do talk a little bit about trauma, but I don't think enough. And that real trauma side. We have refugees. I have a little boy who has never done anything ever in his life that's wrong. He never accepts any responsibility, and we think it's linked to his trauma, but none of us can work out how that's flowed through. We're not experts.
Thank you for sharing that, Jenny. And what I'm hearing coming through is very much contextual as well. You look at, to go back to the iceberg, certainly, and linking back to Govind's presentation as well, when you look at context, you look at socioeconomic, you look at demographics, you look at domestic violence, what comes into the school setting, what comes in the morning, when you're talking to parents, by the end of the day, if there's an event that has happened, the triggers are likely outside of the school context. And it's that mapping of the communication. How do you find out what's going on? But the other thing that I heard coming through very clearly was the ongoing refresher. In my mind's eye, that's about currency. It's about being competent. And it's so interesting because I have a doctoral student at the moment who is working on the training and literacy. She calls it mental health literacy of teacher educators. And what we see coming through is, yes, we do first aid brilliantly. You have to do it at the start of the year. If you're in leadership, you have to do rigorous training around workplace health and safety. It's mandated before the end of January, before you can get into school and start as a fire warden or whatever it is. But at the coalface, when you hit the ground running and you've got your little refugee student that you're dealing with behaviors, you're dealing with denial, you're dealing with avoidance, nobody sees these behaviors as linked to mental health and well-being because they're not visible. It goes back to autism, Cindy. It's an invisible disability because he's good, he'll be right. He's functioning. No, it doesn't matter that he's picking all his hair out from one corner or slashing his wrists or bullying in the playground. So I think that feedback for us is really fantastic, especially looking at how we can further support our schools and educators that we work with. And I think Govind and I will be looking at this together from a psych background in developing and implementing more mental health and well-being across P to 12.
Yeah.
The other thing that I forgot to mention, and I don't know why I forgot to mention it because I deal with it every day, is that, and over my teaching career, the prevalence of self-harm has really increased. And I should have mentioned that because that's something that we do deal with, and, you know, putting in strategies for kids just to go to the bathroom so that they don't take their pencil case, which has got their, you know,
compass and pens and
and cutting. So, and that's probably the difference between now and 10 years ago is that, yes, we did have self-harm, and, you know, sometimes you don't know whether it was happening and people were covering it up, and they're a bit more comfortable showing people now, or what it is. But self-harm is difficult for teachers to deal with as well.
Yes.
Because they feel very guilty.
It can also be quite traumatizing if you're not trained in that area and, you know, kids go to sick bay and you get called in because you're the class teacher, or they were in your class and they lift the shorts up and they've got cuts from here to here. It can be very visually traumatic for a mainstream trained classroom teacher that doesn't have those tools and those strategies to support, you know, and like you said, Cindy, I think this is where the linking comes in. You know, the first thing you're trained to do is not to show it on your face like, oh my God, what have you done?
Yeah.
You know, and it comes back to, am I saying the right thing? Am I showing the right thing? Do I have to have a poker face? You're not allowed to touch. You're not allowed to say, you're okay. Are you okay, sweetheart? Can I help you? What is right? And I think that ongoing reminder training, if you like a refresher course.
Absolutely.
Jen, you know, I think especially the climate, and you know, I'd like to take COVID out of the equation because I think the climate that we're seeing now, 2022, with what's going on just demographically, I think the time is here to have a look at developing that refresher course and having it something that's mandatory. You know, we look at teacher training days, the student-free days. Yeah. And we look at what do we fill that up with. I mean, in my postgraduate courses, all of my students are teachers. Everyone's a teacher wanting to retrain as a master's in guidance and counseling. Everybody wants to be a guidance officer. All 211 of them.
Oh.
And I wonder why. And I ask myself why. And it's $1 million question if I had $1 for each answer. But the thing is, the feedback that we get from our postgraduate cohort is student-free days are the opportunity for such refresher courses. You know, schools are busy places. They loathe to allow teachers to go out on training. And I think a snapshot refresher course that gives, you know, 2 credit points to QCT or whatever it is that students are motivated to engage in, or teachers are motivated to engage in, would be something we'd be looking at developing down the track.
I think if trauma education could be involved with that, it would be great. Our school is just starting to think about trauma in kids' background, and it's the visible trauma that the teachers can see. They don't think about the kids in out of home care, or the student that didn't sleep at home last night and things like that. You know, we have to look at all the students in our school. And I just thought, you know, knowing your students should be, for me anyway, at the utmost of every teacher's day. Is how are you going? What did you do last night? So many kids just come into the classroom and the teachers are worried about the content. I need to get through A to Z before they write their exams. But for me, being, I guess, in a support environment, I have to think about, well, how can I get my student ready to even think about the content, to even think about, can they even sit for an exam, you know, to physically sit in a room for that long.
Yeah, I had a little girl this morning who, his parents, she did something wrong and they cut her hair. And I just, and so we're just dealing through that. So we don't actually make it worse for her at home. I mean, you know, that just sad.
Well, I mean, they're not going to concentrate if they haven't had a good breakfast, have they?
No. Or if their parents threaten to cut their hair.